I have a brilliant move in this position. I sacrifice the rook. Rook takes f6. This is one of the best miniatures I have ever played. This is round 2 of the Newcomb Memorial Tournament here in Dulles, Virginia. And in this round, I had a 2100 rated opponent. His published rating is like 2102, but his live rating is 2098. So that's why you see that on the screen there. And yeah, I played e4, and he plays the Caracal. If you remember, in this last round, I played the Caracal, but this time my opponent did, and I played the fantasy variation. I love playing the fantasy variation because the games are just simply fun. Usually, both sides, both black and white, are happy. I mean, I've spoken to other Cara players, and they love seeing the fantasy variation because objectively, it's balanced. Like objectively, like this is not like you just get interesting positions. It's not the best attempt to be objectively better as white. But the positions are super, super fun. And usually, sometimes white loses super quickly, sometimes black loses super quickly. And in this case, it actually works out in my favor. He plays queen b6, which is the exact same line I play. I play queen b6 on move 3. And after knight c3, he takes and plays e5. This is one of the most trying ways to play against the fantasy variation, where you're contesting white's center. Like other ways to play the fantasy is like e6, for example, and like you say, okay, I'm not going to develop my light squared bishop because, well, you can't develop it outside the pawn chain really easily, and I'm just going to have a very solid setup. And the other way to do it is to just like, open up the center, play e5. White does not want to take because actually it opens up the door for black's pieces really nicely, and actually black is much better if you do take the e-pawn. So this tension between the d-pawn and the e-pawn is very, very common in the fantasy variation. And I play knight f3, and he takes. And this is the exact same thing and that I play as black. So it's really cool to see someone else actually doing it. And as black, I usually go for the move h5 in this position to support my bishop to go to g4. So but my opponent is knight f6 here, and I was thinking about doing a move like a bishop c4, which is a pretty natural way to develop, targeting the f7 pawn. But I didn't like how he had easy development. He doesn't have to go bishop g4, but I also thought, like, should I even give him the option of going bishop g4? And I thought bishop e2 was a good square for the bishop, preventing anything, not allowing anything to go to this light square diagonal, to this g4 square. Another thing to consider is that after bishop c4, and let's say a scenario like let's say both sides castle, at some point there could be a move like bishop c5, and like I can never go bishop e3 to defend because of knight g4 guarded by the bishop on c8, and this bishop cannot defend, and if I move my bishop out of the way, then I lose a piece. And only the queen's guarding this d4 square, and it's protected by the black's queen. So I didn't like the idea of the knight being able to hop in if I did ever want to go bishop e3. But it's probably still fun. Probably both moves are okay, but I do like bishop e2 a lot more. If bishop c5, one of my initial thoughts, I should say, was bishop e3, but I actually do think this works. Actually, I was going back and forth. At first, I thought, oh no, both pieces are hanging, except the rook is not hanging. So actually, I have the move knight a4 here, and I think this is good for white. Both the queen and the bishop are hanging. If you try to defend, then there's, I guess you can try to defend like this, and this probably isn't very good. This probably isn't very good for black here. Probably not. So bishop c5, I might go bishop e3. I might even go knight a4 immediately. I wasn't too psyched about knight a4 immediately because of like queen a5 check, c3, and knight takes. But maybe I have b4, but then actually I don't think I have b4. So I wasn't too psyched about knight a4 immediately, but I knew I had both options. I could, like, if he did play bishop c5, that's a really big middle move. I have either bishop e3 or knight a4 immediately. I felt fine if he did play bishop c5, but instead he plays bishop b4, and bishop b4 pins the knight to the king, and now the e pawn is hanging. And I think like, and that's the hard part about a lot of these fantasy positions, because a lot of times white is left with this isolated king's pawn. So it's like a IQP, isolated queen's pawn, but it's a king pawn instead. So, but point is, white has more space in the center, but this pawn doesn't have any neighbors to help protect it. So this could be a weakness or a strength. And white is trying to claim that it's a strength, and black is trying to claim it's a weakness. And right now, he's trying to really claim that it's not just a weakness, it might even just be a straight up free pawn. And I could try to defend. I could play a move like queen d3, protecting the knight and guarding the d3 pawn. But he would probably take, and if I take with the queen, then he takes the pawn with tempo. Now it gets a little bit tricky because now his knight's hanging, but maybe it's fine. Maybe it's fine. And at the end of the day, I'm still down a pawn, and his pieces are still active, and I don't think I have enough to show for the pawn. So, and if I take with the pawn, well, now I play a defensive queen move instead of developing. And he probably just castle probably. And black is probably doing fine. Maybe white is still slightly better, but I'm not super convinced, to be honest. So instead of playing queen d3 or bishop d3, which is kind of like more passively defending, I just castle. And now he cannot take the pawn immediately because, well, the knight's no longer pinned to the king, so I can just take. And if he takes the knight and then takes, my idea was to play bishop c4, counterattacking the f7 pawn. So if knight takes c3, I would take with the bishop, and let's say it goes here, for example. I could even go queen e1, attacking the knight, and I win my knight back. I win a piece, I guess, for a pawn. And if he goes to f8, then I also have this move, bishop a3 check. I'm not sure if I would have played this move, because I guess there's c5 in this position. But this definitely is okay. I could even play maybe I could get away with knight. No. Knight e6 is very good, because now the king has to go forward, because if bishop takes a discovered check, and white has to be winning here. I feel like the king's stuck in the center, and I have my pieces in the game. I'm not up a piece, but I do have these raging bishops on the open board. So I wasn't scared if he did take the e-pawn. I wasn't scared if he took the e-pawn because I have the bishop c4, and I don't know if he has a great response. One thing you could do is bishop e6. I can't take with the knight because it's pinned, but maybe I could just take and then play queen h5 check. And if he wants to still castle, he can play g6, and then I can go here. And there's no way for him to defend both the rook and the e6 pawn. So, and he can't even castle because my rook is on f1, so this has to be very good. So, and if he just castled, then maybe I could even play queen f3 or queen h5. And the game goes on. Maybe even bishop a3. Probably maybe bishop a3 to try to get the rook off and soften up f7. And if they ever play c5, well, now my knight is no longer pinned to my king. So I definitely think white is doing pretty well if black does take this pawn, because all the time black loses. One thing I was considering, if he did take the pawn, which he ended up not taking the pawn, but if he did take the pawn, I was also considering bishop a3. And I was trying to debate whether or not this was good, because bishop a3, I do allow him to take on c3 with tempo. It's attacking both my queen and my bishop, but he can never castle. So I was like, is this worth it? And if I go queen here, keeping defense of my rook, he actually has this spectacular move, queen takes d4. And I was like, oh no. I was like, uh-oh. And after queen takes, knight check, knight takes e2, check. And after king moves, black is just up 2 knights in this position. And I was like, okay, so let's not do that. I was like, let's not play bishop a3. But those were the things I was considering if he did play knight takes e4. But the thing is, he didn't play knight takes e4, he simply castled. Which makes sense, because he's saying, this e-pawn is not going anywhere. I'm going to damage your pawn structures. Yeah, I'm going to give you the bishop pair, but these pawns are weaknesses. I'm just going to slowly but surely finish development. I don't know where you're going to put your bishop yet or the knight, but he just wants to finish development and long term attack these pawns, and he thinks he's going to have a decent game. But the issue is that after castling, I have a brilliant move in this position. I sacrifice the rook. Rook takes f6, and if he doesn't take me, well, I'm just up a piece, so he has to take. And now I'm playing with the initiative here. And I was calculating for a while. I think I thought for maybe about 10 minutes here, and I couldn't resist how good it looked. Because after rook takes, he has to take with the knight, or has to take with the pawn. And look at how these pieces on the queen side are not helping with the defense of the king. They feel like miles and miles away. That being said, though, if he gets 2 turns or 1 extra turn, then he's just going to be up in exchange because he has a rook for a knight. Or no, yeah, rook for a knight. Oh, rook for a bishop, I guess, in this case. I have 2 bishops, he has 1. So he has to be precise here. And I thought at the very least, like, I'm at least slightly better. Because after bishop h6, I think he has to give up the rook. Because if he doesn't, well, firstly, if he does give up the rook, it's going to be tough to even try to develop. Like, I don't even know where you put your bishop. Like, if you go knight d7, then I probably won't take the rook. I probably won't. Maybe I would play queen e1. But let's say I did take the rook. Then I think he has adequate defense. But now he has these double pawns. I have these double pawns. And life goes on. And I think he might have a better chance of holding. But of course, probably if knight d7, probably would have gone queen e1 and tried to checkmate him. But maybe knight e5. And if I try to checkmate him, he just blocks with the knight. And the game goes on. But I still have lots of threats. I still have lots of threats, but I think this is a good chance for him to try to hold on here. If he just gives back the rook or doesn't care about it. But instead, he actually moves the rook. So when your initiative is just like, they have to respond to you. So I take the knight. He has to respond. I attack the rook. He wanted to keep his extra material, so I guess in that case he had to respond. And he moves his rook, and now I play queen e1, and now my threat is a queen g3 check, king h8 would be the only move, and queen g7 would simply be checkmate. So I have this checkmate and 2 threat, and now he has to defend. And he ends up going king h8, which I think this position's already losing. Like, it's already lost. Because what do you even do? Like, what do you even do? Any piece you move, I'm going queen g3 and queen g7. So he goes king h8, so he can meet queen g3 with rook g8. And if I go queen f4, attacking this pawn, he could go rook g6, defending the pawn and attacking the bishop. And I was calculating for a long time in this position on whether or not to go queen g3 or queen h4. And I thought both were good, but I think one is better than the other. So queen g3 forces him to play the only move in the position, rook g1 or rook g8. It's the only move. And after queen f4, he's forced to play the only move in the position once again. Actually, no, there's 2 moves. There's c5, defending the pawn laterally. And there's rook g6. And I thought, like, this was good because, like, if he did play rook g6, I have this move, bishop h5, attacking the rook. And I thought this was pretty good for me. But at the same time, I was like, okay, he's probably going to give the rook back. Like, for example, knight d7. And after bishop takes, pawn takes, like, everything's defended. Although knight d7 blocks in his own bishop, so he's probably still losing. But I was like, is this super obvious? Like, I don't think this is super obvious, like, how winning this is. But it probably is very winning. It probably is. But he doesn't have to go rook g6, though. He could also go c5. And I was like, oh, there's knight c5, and he could take, and then go knight c6, maybe. And I was like, am I really better here? Like, now he's going to get his rooks in, and Like I was very much not confident that I would be winning this game. It's hard to say though for sure. So instead of queen g3, I ended up going queen h4 because now he doesn't have time for rook g8 because this is just going to simply be checkmate, crisscross applesauce, and he has to defend the pawn in 3 different ways. He of course can't push because I go queen f6 anyways, and if he defends with the rook, well, now the rook is 2 moves away from going to g8, so now queen g3 would be hitting the rook and threatening checkmate, and actually checkmate's unstoppable. So he can't defend with the rook. He could defend with the knight, but if he defends with the knight, it blocks in his own bishop, and it's going to be hard for his other rook to get into the game. So now I could probably follow up with rook f1. And he could play c5, but now I can play knight f5. And now the bishop cannot take this knight that's on f5, so maybe I can go bishop g7 check. Maybe I can go knight, and maybe if I can force the king on g8 and then defend the bishop, and then knight e7 would be checkmate in some cases too. So his pieces are stuck. He's absolutely stuck here. And I don't think there's much you can do. And the third way to defend is what he played. Third way to defend this pawn, I mean, and he played c5. Attacking the knight. And if I move my knight, well, his bishop still has scope, and so he can give it up. And now his queen's defending laterally. Maybe he can play knight d7 next, maybe knight f8, maybe rook g8, and then knight f8. And I'm probably still better, but it's not super obvious. Maybe his bishop's going to go, like if I ever go bishop c7 to attack the f7 pawn, go knight e5, attacking my bishop, defending the f7 pawn, and his knight's actually not that bad, and he's going to eventually get his rooks in the game. And maybe I'm not worse, but I'm not super convinced, to be honest. So after c5, I realized, well, I don't have to defend the knight. I don't have to move the knight. And I realized this before. Oh, whoops! I realized this before playing queen h4. So I realized that as a queen h4, c5, I don't have to go knight f5. I don't have to. I can just go rook f1. So after queen h4 and c5, I sacrifice the knight. I play rook f1, and there's no possible way for him to defend this pawn. If he goes knight d7 to defend, well, now we get the same variation as before, knight f5, and his pieces are all stuck. He can never move his queen because he needs to guard this pawn. He can never move this knight because it's guarding this pawn. I have bishop g7 potentially, and adding another attacker on f7, on f6, I mean, whenever I want. So there are so many issues with his position. If he plays knight d7 to help guard, if he goes rook d6, that's another way to defend. But remember what I said about the rook needing is 2 moves away from going to g8. Now queen g3 is still checkmate, unstoppable checkmate, and there is nothing black can do. So he ends up just taking the knight. I go rook f6, and it's beautiful how these 3 pieces are just swarming the black king, and these 4 pieces are doing absolutely nothing in the black position. They have not moved, and they're ready for the next game. He plays queen b1, check. There's not much else to do in the position. I play king f2. The other move is rook f1. Rook f1 attacks the queen and threatens the rook and threatens f6. But he can play queen b6, getting the queen out of danger, defending the rook, and defending f6. I definitely thought this was still winning. Like, yeah, this is for sure still winning. But do I really want to calculate this? Or even here, do I really want to calculate this? No. So instead of going rook f1, I just play king f2, and he's out of moves. Like, if he plays bishop e6, I'm going to take, and I'm threatening to take the rook with checkmate. I'm also threatening to play queen f6 check and checkmate, and there's absolutely nothing he can do. Same thing with knight c6. Same thing with queen b6. There's no moves in this position. If you play king b8, or king g8, I mean, that's still checkmate in 2. So he's absolutely busted here. So he plays d3. And yeah, I mean the game goes on for a few more moves if I take it, or if I take it like this, the game goes on for a bit more. But instead, I'm still laser focused. I play Rook takes f7, and simply I'm threatening checkmate here. If he goes King g8, I have check, and no matter where he moves the king, it's just going to be checkmate. And if he and what he does in the game is go Queen b6. But now I play Bishop e3, and there's simply nothing to be done here because I'm threatening checkmate on h7. And if he defends checkmate with Queen g6, I'm threatening the rook. I'm going to take the rook, and that will be checkmate as well. A lawnmower mate, a back rank mate, whatever you want to call it, immediately on the board. Also, Queen g6 is also maybe even Bishop e4. Bishop d4, I mean. Although that doesn't win, actually, because rook takes. So, maybe not that move. But yeah, he resigns in this position because the position is totally lost, and it's move 19. It's move 19, and he resigns. And I really think, like, it was one mistake that leads to another. I think, I don't think Bishop e4 was the right idea. Like, in the Karakhan, you really do not want to give up your dark squared bishop. Like, you really don't want to. Um, Even if it's for doubling pawns, unless you have a really, really concrete idea. And I think he rushed with this move, Bishop b4. I don't think it was a good move. And then taking a knight and castling, that was really bad because of this awesome sacrifice on f6. And I'm about to go to the game review section, so we'll see what the eval says. But I believe I played a nearly perfect game here because all my moves were really easy. Like I don't think I played super impressively. I just had very easy moves, and I was able to, I honestly think I was a little bit lucky that he played that I went out of the opening, basically. So I don't think uh, this will happen too often. But whenever it does happen, it's good to be able to pounce on it. You got to be sharp, pounce on opportunities like this. I think he could have put up more resistance, but usually one mistake leads to another. Rook d8, I think, was another mistake. King h8 was another mistake. And by the time c5 happens, his position is dead lost, in my opinion. But who knows? Maybe the engine will think differently. But until then, the fantasy variation of the Karakhan is a really, really good weapon to have. You get these very interesting positions, and yeah, maybe even you can take down some 2100s as well. Okay, I think I'm gonna go to the game review section. I'll see you guys next time.